I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. This is She Said, She Said. For more than 2 decades, Vital Voices has worked with thousands of women from more than 184 countries and territories to help them develop as leaders and entrepreneurs. But perhaps most interesting, these women make up a significant network who are at the forefront of global progress and innovation around the world. Our special guest today is my friend Alyse Nelson. She is the CEO of Vital Voices. She's leading a model that is often referred to as collaboration in action, where she brings together corporate, nonprofit, and governmental partnerships to support these women and the impact that they're having in their communities. Alyse, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Well, I am delighted. I've been looking so forward to this conversation. Vital Voices is an amazing organization, but for those who may not know, how do you describe Vital Voices?
What I often say is we invest in women to improve the world, right? That's our motto, our mantra. But really what we do is we search the world for women who have a daring vision for change. And then we invest in them through training, mentoring, a network of their peers, financial support, visibility, credibility for their work to really help them take that daring vision to scale. We support women over long periods of time. Quite frankly, that's really different. I think we're really turning traditional philanthropy on its head. Traditional philanthropy, as you know, is very much about really a mile wide and an inch deep. Touch as many heads as you possibly can. And what we believe is that by going deep over a long period of time, so we support women over decades sometimes, and really getting deeply into what it is that they need, so it's a real bespoke approach, that's where you're going to have real impact. We also, I think a lot of people think of us as, okay, you're a global organization solving global challenges. And although that's true, really, we're about local leadership. We're about women who saw a wrong in their community, whether it's human trafficking or the lack of girls' education. And they experienced it in some way, maybe not directly, but probably indirectly, or something in them pulled at them. But they had that direct experience. We find that so often with women leaders. And they decided, well, I'm going to step up and I'm going to right that wrong. And I think that's the power of what we do around the world. It's about women changing what they know. And that's the most powerful, method, most effective method of change.
Mm-hmm. Give me an example of someone who has been part of the Vital Voices network, maybe since the beginning, and the different ways in which you've supported her. Maybe talk a little bit about her story.
Oh, wow. We've done some great case studies.
You have a lot to...
there's so many different women I could tell you about. One woman I'm thinking of off the top of my head, because we're going to be working with her really soon in the next year on another project, is a woman named Panmela Castro from Brazil. She is a graffiti artist. And I had heard about her from a friend of mine, and he said, you've got to go down to Brazil at some point. Next time you're there, you've got to look this woman up. So she didn't speak any English. She only speaks Portuguese. I go down and through my somewhat a little bit of Spanish and her a little bit of Spanish, we communicate. She takes me around to see her graffiti art. What's so amazing about her is that many years later, she finally told me this story, but I knew there had to be a personal experience there. She said, I never knew that domestic violence is a crime in my country. But sure enough, in 2006, there was a law created on the books called the Maria de Pena Law. And it was after this woman who basically was shot in the spine by her husband, became paralyzed. She survived, to his misfortune, and she took him to court and then won, and then they got this law on the books that says the domestic violence is a crime. That's not that long ago,
2006.
Right? 2006. So I was there in 2009 seeing her graffiti, and she over time, as we got to know each other, she said, I too was a victim of domestic violence, but I didn't know that it was wrong because there was no word for domestic violence back then. Culturally, it was acceptable that you could beat your wife. You owned your wife, that machismo culture that exists. So she decided, okay, I'm going to do the only thing I know. One, I'm going to leave this, violent marriage. She got married very young. She didn't have much, but she left. And she said, then I'm going to start doing my art, but I'm going to use my art to tell my story. But I'm not going to tell people it's my story because I believe it's many other women's stories. So her art, the graffiti art, it's not tagging the way we might think of graffiti here. It's really these incredible murals. And she uses the murals to really tell people it's wrong to beat a woman. This is against the law. And I think what she's done is she's brought a law that, quite frankly, is only effective if it's taken from the piece of paper into reality. Mm-hmm. She's taken it and she's made it pop culture, and so she's used culture in a way to shift culture. So when I met her, I immediately saw this, but I had to convince her that she was a leader. She's like, I'm not a leader. I'm just a girl doing graffiti in the street. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no, but you are changing the cultural, norm, the paradigm. I mean, you are creating this really powerful tool that people could use all over the world. So I think the first thing we did with her is really just convince her that she was a leader. And that took a little bit of time. I mean, she tells a really funny story about who's this gringo telling me I'm a leader? I'm just, doing my graffiti and my spray paint, Anyway, but she's one of the most, renowned social activist graffiti artists, and she travels all over the world. She actually, like you, who I know is a global ambassador with Vital Voices, she also had the experience of being mentored by Rena DeSesto, who's at Bank of America leading all of their arts and culture work. Mm-hmm. And she was her mentor. And she said, you've got to start charging companies for this, so that you can bring revenue into your nonprofit. And she's like, really? It could be a business? So she's constantly bringing that in. So it obviously takes people who want to continuously learn. But she's participated in probably 4 or 5 different Vital Voices training programs over the years. Everything from that sort of business acumen and strategic planning to public speaking training. She now speaks fluent English. That she did on her own. We've given her a lot of visibility. She was honored by Diane von Furstenberg with her DVF award. She's been honored by us. I think she's really seen as a leader around the world. And that's what we're trying to do. Ultimately, we measure our progress in 4 core areas. Did she set out to achieve the vision that, she set for herself, right? Did she create cultural change in the process? Meaning, do people think about women and women's leadership differently? Do women think differently about themselves, right? Because that's also cultural change that needs to happen. 3, is she seen as a global leader in her industry? So not just, I do my project, and I can come talk about my project, but her project is a great example that can be shared around the world and replicated by other people, not just her, right? And we see other people investing. And that's one of the things we want to see. I mean, we're almost like venture capitalists. We think of ourselves more as venture catalysts because we're finding those great leaders, investing in them, but bringing other people along to invest. And we do measure that. And then finally, is she paying it forward in her community and beyond? So we look at how is she giving back to the Vital Voices community of other women leaders. And one of the things that Panmela does every year with Vital Voices is she mentors our Her Lead fellows. And Her Lead is a program for American high school girls.
Oh, wow.
So here it's like totally full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, let's talk a bit about this notion of mentorship, which really runs as a thread through all of your programs. Yes. The Global Ambassadors program that you mentioned that I was very privileged to participate in a few years ago is a great example of this. Talk about how that program works and what makes it so unique and special.
Yeah, well, first off, I'd say I think the secret sauce there is a woman named Zoe Dean Smith, who's really built the program out.
Who works on your team.
Yes, who works on my team. She's amazing. I mean, we're blessed to have an amazing team of entrepreneurs, quite frankly. I mean, people who want to create and develop and learn and make it better and better. And that's what she's done with that program. And it's a partnership with Bank of America. And you think about Bank of America as this huge institution, but we are aligned with we believe that women leaders can change the world. We both believe that. Anne Finucane, who really was the great champion and partner in putting this program together, senior most woman at Bank of America, vice chair now. So that program really brings a small group, quite frankly, again, going back to that, let's not scale wide, let's scale deep, a small group, 10 or 12 mentees. We send out applications. Right now we have applications for an upcoming program in Puerto Rico. And women really have to apply, and we are really looking for not just the person who's got the great organization or company that they want to scale, and they need that input, that support, that strategy, to take it to the next level. But we're also looking for people who are ready, because really good mentors are not just people who are ready to lift you up, but they're people who are also going to tell you where, you're falling down and when you fall down. And those are the good mentors. And that's what we're trying to build, is that authentic, real mentorship across the globe. And so it's a week-long program in a particular community. We've got 10 or 12 mentees, 10 or 12 global ambassadors. And these are women really at the top of their field, women like you, women who've achieved more than they probably ever thought they'd achieve. And they're looking at how they can give back. And they don't just want to write a check. They want to be impactful, but maybe not just in their own backyard. They can do things easily in their community, at their children's schools, but they also want to have that global reach and impact. And there is something so special about women coming together with each other, right? And so I think that bond over a week of the mentors and the mentees coming together around an agenda of strategic planning, communications training, public speaking training, I think that really provides an incredible, not just network and support for the mentees, but I think also for the mentors. I think they get more out of it than they probably thought they would, because they're sort of coming thinking, well, I'm coming to give, and there's a get as well. And I think that's what keeps people bonded to their mentees and mentors. But, at the end of the day, you can't force any relationship. When you're linking up a mentor and a mentee, you don't know, is this going to work or is it not, right? So you just have to see. We do our very best, and I think that Zoe does a great job of making all those connections happen.
Yeah. It is certainly a component of the secret sauce in matching people up in a way that works, even though it may not be completely obvious to them at the first meeting. That was certainly true in my case, and it ended up being a perfect match.
Oh, good.
At first, I think we both thought, what do we have in common? What are we going to be able to share with each other that really is going to be meaningful and impactful? And it is revealed over the course of that period of time, which is pretty incredible. Yeah. Any insights that you can share into how Zoe makes those matches and makes them successful?
I think one of the things that makes them successful is all the mentees have that, I want to learn. I want to learn, I'm ready, I'm open. And all of the mentors come with that, I want to give. And I'm open. I'm open for wherever this takes me. And I think that openness, that willingness to sort of give and pay it forward is really what creates a magical relationship. So it doesn't have to be across the same industry. I can't say every match has always been perfect, but it's pretty darn close. I mean, she is quite good at it.
One of the topics we talk about on the podcast a good bit is around feedback and how important and critical it is, but how difficult it can be oftentimes for women to hear, because we do hold ourselves up to such a high standard.
Yeah.
Any perspective on how to think about feedback and how to teach yourself to really use it in the spirit in which it's intended, and also be able to distill good feedback from not so good feedback, right? Not everybody that gives you feedback is necessarily going to be giving you feedback that's in your best interest. And I think this question is so interesting. I get this question, especially from young women, a lot. How do you know if it's good feedback?
Yeah, well, your gut is more important than you are ever going to give it credit for. Every time I haven't gone with my gut, it's been the wrong decision, right? So that's very important in weighing feedback. But, over the years, I have certainly learned the critical role of feedback, and that it is a gift, actually. And so even if it hurts or stings, let's say, at the time, you need to take it in and unpack it, not get emotional about it. I think for me, I wouldn't be in my position if I didn't learn very quickly how to take feedback. So I've been with Vital Voices since its founding. I was in the government when we began and then took it out of the government. I was the first employee creating it as a nonprofit. But I wasn't the CEO, right? It was always someone of my mother's generation who I really looked up to and admired who was the CEO. And so I ran the programs and I ran all around the world and I got to know women and I loved what I did. And then one day, Milan Verveer, who was the then chair of the board and CEO, said, one day we see you running this. I mean, you are Vital Voices. And I was like, what? You do? And she's like, well, of course. Of course, this is your organization. We've just been mentoring and waiting for you to be ready to step into the role. And then when she was tapped by Secretary Clinton at the beginning of 2009 to go in and be the first ever global ambassador for women's issues, she said, this is yours now. And I had at that point become president. So it was now I'm president and CEO. But really not having that buffer of an incredible leader like Milan between me and the board and me and all the partners. I mean, I was doing so much internally with the team and with the women we work with around the world. But not having that buffer, all of a sudden, I realized I need to step back. I need to bring everybody along. The board doesn't totally know me. Actually, they think of me as this like young whippersnapper, yes. Very passionate, but maybe not like the most strategic. But actually, I am strategic, but they don't know that about me, right? And so I need to show them that I understand the finances and, proving myself again. But at the same time, I had to walk that line. And I learned this, and it was a hard lesson, right? But I had to walk that line of making sure I showed them what I knew, but never being closed to learning more. Because at the same time, I sort of knew, like, I'm not perfect. I want to be the best possible CEO for Vital Voices. And quite frankly, I'm still not perfect, right? I mean, truly. So I think, I constantly take feedback. And, sometimes it can be really hard, and people will say, well, so-and-so, I heard them saying such and such about you. And I'm like, yeah, people are always going to say not very nice things sometimes about the people in charge. Like, that's just going to happen. No one is going to agree with everything I say, but I hope they respect me. That's it, right? They don't have to like me. But I do think it's important to listen to that and take it in, even if it stings sometimes. Because a lot of times, even if you don't need to take it, there's probably a nugget or a kernel of truth in there, right? A something you can glean from it, right?
Yeah. So something you said that I think is so important, and I get this question a lot, I suspect you do as well. It can be difficult when you have grown up in an organization as a young person just starting out, working your way up the food chain, to have the people around you think of you as the leader that you aspire to be. And that may sound a little bit strange, but you said something interesting. You knew, or someone told you, and I want to know the answer to this because I think this is really critical. How did you know what you needed to illustrate for the board, for funders, for all of the people that were going to be working with Vital Voices? How did you know what types of skills you needed to exhibit in order for them to consider you as the potential successor to Milan?
Yeah. I think the difference is prior to becoming the CEO, it's head down, working like crazy, doing the work, getting it done. And I think CEO is head up, not looking crazy. As much as you possibly can, know. I mean, even though you are busy, but it's also it's a shift in mindset, right? And for me, a lot of things all kind of happened at the same time when I became CEO. That really helped me sort of get out of the busy work, head down, and look at the big picture. Because you can't manage people, you can't be strategic if you continue to be that person who's just running along.
But that can be a big criticism of women in particular, that if I just keep my head down and I work really hard, then they're going to notice me and they're going to promote me, period. Now you're in a unique, you were in a unique situation in that it's an organization run largely with women, by women, for women, right?
Yeah.
You don't, that's typically a model that we talk about in big corporate organizations where you have both men and women and all of that. But how did you know how to begin to think more strategically? Like, who said to you, hey, you got to get your head up. You've got to illustrate what you can do so that people know.
Well, I had a really tough board member who at the time I thought, oh boy, she's hard on me. But now I really thank her because she told me a lot of sort of stinging things at the time that now I look back and I think, man, that was such good advice. I mean, so she would say, for example, she'd be like, you need to stop taking phone calls in airports and in taxis. I know you're trying to get as much done, but sometimes I'm on a call with you on a conference call and like people can tell you're running and you don't sound like you're listening. And I was like, no, but I'm listening. I'm just trying to, but it's like, who cares who cares? It's how people perceive you, right? So it doesn't really, that doesn't matter, right? That you think you're able to get it all done. You are listening, but you sound like you're not. So I just made a rule. I don't do that anymore, right? I won't do the calls in taxis and the running through the airport. I mean, if it's an emergency, then I really make sure everybody knows this is where I am. I really apologize, because otherwise you just sound like you're just crazy and out of control. I mean, so that was one piece of feedback she gave me. I mean, she really, I think, gave me a lot of advice, like you need to act like a CEO, right? You can't just be the person who's getting it all done and running as fast as you can and extremely passionate. You have to also be really strategic. So I think you learn that over time. I mean, one of my other lessons, quite frankly, was learning that growth is not necessarily a good thing. Right? So I wanted to grow the organization when I became CEO.
So growth, not personal growth, you're talking
about.
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
Organizational growth.
Personal growth is always good.
Pretty sure you meant
always
organizational
good,
growth.
Except if it's this way. Anyway.
Right. Exactly.
Anyway, but no, I mean, it's when I took over, I was like, why are we so small? We should be much bigger. I think we were like 12 staff and I don't know, maybe around $2 million a year in budget. And I was like, I want to grow. Like, we should be bigger. And so we grew really fast, and I hired a lot of senior people to run departments, and they were super smart, and I'm doing everything right. I'm hiring people who are smarter than me. This is great. But really, those people were not down with the culture. Was it their fault? No, it was my fault, because when you're really small, when you're like 12 people in an organization, you'll say, oh, she's so Vital Voices. Yeah, we should hire her. She's so Vital Voices. Or we should support that woman. She's so Vital Voices. And everybody knows what that means, what those values are. Everybody knows. They don't need to be articulated. But when you grow very quickly to like 45 people, as we did, and then we recently had another growth spurt, but if you don't articulate those things, if it's not really clear and embedded and everybody's acting upon it and you're hiring and firing around it, you got a problem because you're going to build an organization that's not aligned. And that's actually what happened to me. And I had to reel it back. I had to really get the strategy firm. Like, what are we really good at? And I had to, jigger things around. And I mean, luckily, I think when people know that they're not right, they tend to leave on their own. That was probably one of the hardest lessons I had to learn, that like culture is actually sort of the how we do it is more important than the what we do, right? And how much we can achieve and how fast we can run. It's making sure we're all going together.
How do you know the difference between pulling the plug and recalibrating and continuing to double down? How do you know when it's a question of we just haven't given it enough time versus we need to pivot? How did you know?
For a person or for a strategy?
For the organization. So in the example that you gave, in terms of dialing it back and recalibrating the culture so that everybody really got the culture, how did you know whether it was just a matter of giving it more time versus a pivot?
It was a big aha moment, one staff retreat we had, where there became a very heated discussion, and it became very clear that there was a whole group of the organization who felt that we're about development, and there was another group who was like, no, we're about leadership.
Wow.
And
it's pretty fundamental.
I was like, whoa, okay, wait a minute. I think also, I saw silos begin to develop where you had departments really kind of like their own organization within an organization. And it's just, you begin to see that and you're like, okay, wait a minute. We no longer need to be like going, we need to pull back. And, I had to go to the board and basically say we might have to shrink to grow because we need to get the strategy right. Some of the programs we're doing, I don't think are our core capacity. And we did a big strategic overhaul, right? Of like, what are we really good at? Who else is in the space? I mean, when we started as an NGO, there were like 4 other organizations doing this work. Mm-hmm. And now there's like, 4,000 or more, there's a lot. And so we really need to look at, okay, what's our value add? But also when we were created in 1997, I don't even think Google was around yet. I think they came in 98 right. They probably weren't even mainstream till like 2000. But, so it was a very different world. So if we were to be created today, would we be needed? And how would we be different considering that technology is what it is, right? So we really went back to our roots. And that really showed us, okay, we are really good at finding extraordinary women and really investing in them and their vision. It is not about our vision for them. So any program that we do where we don't have any control over the applicants is not going to be right because we know how to pick the great leaders, right? So it needs to have that. We also want to make sure that we're not pulling a group of women together and say, hey, everybody come together and work on a project that you think is important in your community. If I was asked, do you want to be part of a program that's about you and your vision as a leader? Or would you like to be part of a program where we're pulling a whole bunch of women together in your country and saying, hey, come up with a project to work together on and we'll support it? It's just like, you know what I mean? Sure, both are interesting, but like we are much better at that first piece around investing in a woman and her vision. At the end of the day, I don't know the situation in Nigeria or Afghanistan or, a rural community in the United States. I don't know. And so you want to find the leader who has been there, experienced it, and has the answer, but needs the support to make that solution a reality.
So when this program first started, it started as a program at the State Department under then Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. It has now evolved into a nonpartisan NGO that you've referenced. Why, from your perspective, is it important to be nonpartisan?
Because it's not about politics. It is very much about women's leadership, and I think everybody can get behind that. We will speak out about whatever's going on, certainly, because we need to. But we need to be about the issues and about progress and policy before we are about politics. So we tend sometimes not to name names because we don't want to get into that. We just want to say this is what we believe, what the women leaders that we work with believe is right. So, it's just not about politics, politics in that way, right? It's certainly about women political leadership around the world and in this country, but it's not about fundamentals like that.
Is it difficult to maintain that balance in the current environment?
Yeah, it is.
And how do you do it?
I think it's always putting policy and progress for women above politics, and so and also it's really trying to stay out of the fray. One of the things that we really try and do at our Global Leadership Awards event, we want to make it a night in Washington that is like a politically neutral or free zone, because we feel like, particularly I think right now in Washington, it's like people want to go somewhere where it can be hopeful and we can just talk about, the world and women's progress and not get so much into all this, that, the other issue, right? It's hard, I have to say. It's always been hard. I think right now it is more difficult, absolutely.
The partisan piece is a very difficult one to navigate, and I think the more conversations we can have about collaboration and being collaborative and finding ways of reaching across the aisle, it just broadens the tent for women.
Well, and I think the 2 women who ultimately registered Vital Voices as a 501c3, when we were in the government and we were looking at the transition, and the women in our network said, look, you've got to keep this thing going. It was not just a conference or a training. It's bigger than that. It's a global network of women leaders. We want to stay connected, and we want to have you driving that. 2 women, one Republican, one Democrat, Mary Yerrick, the Republican, and Donna McClarty, the Democrat, came together and registered the NGO. And that was very much by design. It wasn't saying, oh, you and you. The 2 of them were collaborating and involved. So I think, we never thought of it as a place that was about politics. we actually don't take on issues of reproductive rights because we think that they can be too divisive. I mean, I think it's a very important issue. Many of the women that we work with may work on that issue, but it's not something that we're taking on head on.
Let's talk more about you. You have been involved in women's leadership development since college. What was it that attracted you to this work?
I think I grew up with a mother who is just an absolute badass, if I can say that on your podcast, Laura. She started surfing at age 50, and she led us on adventures all over the world. And she was just this amazing, larger than life person.
She still surfs, right?
She still does.
And she's not 80.
She's 75.
75.
Yeah. So, but I remember growing up, she would always say to me that she wanted to be an architect, and she has a master's in math and in art. But she was told by every man, including her own father, that really that wasn't a wise choice because no one's ever going to really hire a woman to design and build a strong structure. So I grew up with that story, but also her saying to me, but things are different now, you can do whatever you want, right? And my dad, same thing, right? But then I think, traveling around the world, I began to wonder, is that really the case around the world? I mean, quite frankly, that's not the case anywhere in the world. But when I got to college, I remember I took every single course with the word woman in the title. I just wanted to learn as much as I could about women's rights in this country, and also anything I could learn in school at the time about women around the world. And what I found is that there was very little information. Not a lot of books you could buy about none that you could buy really about global women's issues. You might see a passing article about, honor crimes in Pakistan or acid attacks or, something horrific about the victimization of women around the world. But other than that, there was no real global women's movement. This is before the internet, quite frankly. So I heard about something called the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women. It was happening in Beijing, China. Randomly, I heard about it. I was making some calls to figure out if I could get someone from the UN to come and speak at my university. And this woman said, well, are you coming to the Beijing Women's Conference? And I was like, what is that? She says, well, yeah, if you have an NGO. And I was like, what's an NGO? What is an NGO? You can actually come and register. And I thought, well, I'll just make up an NGO. Why not? So I registered, sent off my, application.
You were like 19, 20?
I was 21. Yeah, I remember I called my dad. I said, Dad, guess what? I'm going to Beijing to the women's conference. He said, Beijing, Texas? You're not going to Beijing, China. I don't even know if there's a Beijing, Texas, but... But anyway, I just, I managed to, buy the cheapest ticket I could find and took multiple flights to get there and had an incredible experience there. And I realized that there were so many issues that my generation, a up-and-coming global generation, did not know about. We were going to be this first generation of a global economy, whatever that was at the time. And connected to each other, but yet we didn't know so many of the issues we faced. So I realized, I have a part to play here. And quite frankly, for me, it was when I heard Hillary Clinton's speech. She spoke in Beijing. I knew it was very difficult for her to get there. Many people didn't want her to go and speak out on human rights issues of women in China. There was not long after the Tiananmen Square crisis. And so when I heard her speak, I realized the only way people will know what happened here and the things that I know are people who listen to that speech. And people will listen to that speech because it'll be on TV and it'll be covered in the news. It will go viral. And it did, because there were so many eyes on it because they were worried she wasn't going to do it right. And she would just hit the ball out of the park. And I think for me, this 21-year-old trying to find my way in the world, listening to that speech after being surrounded by all these women at that conference, learning about human trafficking and child marriage, all these things I never knew existed. No one knew at that time. This was not part of the mainstream. Just sitting there, I realized, here's a woman who has a voice and power as the First Lady. It's a very undefined position in many ways, but she knows when she speaks, people will listen. And she realized, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use it to raise the voices of women around the world. And I think it was the boldest, bravest, most important thing she ever did was make the decision to go to that conference and speak. And I took away from that, hey, I've got a voice too, and I can use it. Not as big as hers, not as powerful, but I can go back to my university. I'm on the board. I was the president of the forensics speaking team, and I can like pull together a little bit of money. I can bring people together. And I can share these issues. And one of the people I invited to come up was the head of the President's Interagency Council on Women at the White House. And she's like, how did you get all these young people interested in these issues and to all come together? And I said, young people know, like, we're going to be connected very soon through technology, but we need to learn about each other. So they want to know about these issues. And she's like, you should come down and work for us. Oh, I can't pay you, by the way. So, my next call was to my dad. Well, I'm going to go to Washington. I'm going to work at the White House, but I'm not going to get paid. Yeah. At least to start. And I just thought, I'll put graduate school on hold. I was going to go to graduate school. I thought, well, I'll just put it on hold because there was no reason I was going to graduate school. I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. But I knew this really spoke to my spirit. Moved down to Washington and never came back. never went back to California where I'm from. But I just stayed. It was a bold, crazy decision to do that. And it was the best decision of all time. 6 months later, my boss, then at the White House, as the head of the President's Interagency Council, was asked to come to the State Department and build it there, set up the first Global Women's Issues Office, which later became the Global Ambassador, but it wasn't elevated to that level yet. And she said, you should come with me and we'll figure out how to get you paid there. And sure enough, a few months later, Swanee Hunt, ambassador to Austria at the time, walks in, this is 1996 now, walks in and says, I want to plan a regional gathering of women. It's going to be called Vital Voices. And I was in the meeting taking the notes. There was like 2 other people who staffed her at the time. And she looks at me and she says, you'll be our point person in this office. So I always credit Swanee Hunt because Vital Voices started as a one-off conference, and that's all it was going to be. And I had a job for 6 months building this and developing it and doing the follow-on. But then what happened is something pretty magical, which is that women around the world heard about it. They heard that Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright had come together to keep the message of women's leadership and what happened to Beijing alive. And they had done so much work in the United States, and now they wanted to work with women around the world and elevate and sort of credentialize, validate great women leaders who are not household names. And so that's how it began. And women around the world said, we want Vital Voices in our community too, which was amazing, but also it meant I kept a job. Anyway.
It changed your life.
Yeah, it changed my life. And then, and I've been with it since. And it's interesting because people will often say to me, isn't it time you do something else? And I'm like, why? If I can say to myself on a regular basis, I am challenged, I am passionate, and I'm still curious, like, I'm in the right place, which I am, because I think these issues have really hit their stride. They've become more divisive in some ways, but I think in other ways, people are awake now and they're talking about it. And I think that's the important thing.
Huge change.
Yeah, huge
change. So you are talking to and working with women who in many cases have suffered significant trauma and or hardship. How do you deal with that emotionally?
Yeah. I think for me, what I feel like I get to see is the best of humanity, because these are people who maybe suffered the trauma themselves, right? So women who have run shelters to support and protect and uplift survivors of human trafficking who were indeed victims of some sort of violence themselves, right? And that's why they do it. One of the things that I've come to realize is doing it helps them heal, right? And that's very powerful. I don't know how many of them do it, right? Because they're in it all the time, seeing this repeat, victimization, seeing, incredible stories of survivors as well, but that's difficult. Honestly, my job is nowhere near as difficult as theirs, because what I do is find those great leaders and those champions who are making the world a better place, and I get to support them and stand behind them. And so I get to see the best, sadly, I think they see some of the worst, but what they are and what they represent is the best. And I think what we offer is supporting people who support the world, and what's better than that?
How do you talk? So Victoria, your daughter,
yes,
is still quite young. She's 5?
No, 4.5.
4.5, 4.5, almost 5. And your son is 2 years younger than his older sister. How do you talk to them about what you do?
So my husband and I both travel quite a bit. So we definitely have a village, right, that helps us. I mean, we have an incredible nanny. My parents come a lot, more for the emotional support than anything else. And we also never travel at the same time, or we try very hard not to travel at the same time. My husband actually works on refugee issues. And so it's very easy to describe, some children don't have homes, and daddy is going to see those children and help them. With me, often probably the easiest way to describe it is just to say, some girls don't get to go to school the way you get to go to school. I mean, that's probably the extent to what I can say. But I think for both of us, we are really both committed to making the world a better place, and we really want to make sure our kids understand that. And, they're very privileged in some ways that we weren't even. And I feel like I grew up privileged. But, I think we want to be really cautious to make sure they know that there's so much need in the world. And also that we don't have all the solutions, but the solutions are out there. And find the people who are doing that and find ways to support them with grace and real dignity for those people and humility.
How do you define success for yourself?
For myself? My husband always tells me I'm like a shark. It's like if I stop, I die. Always have to have the next project, the next,
Going.
He's like, why do you make it so difficult? Anyway, for yourself. I think it's just pushing and achieving, right? So it's setting goals, growth of the organization, new things. We've got some exciting new projects up our sleeve. That I certainly see success. I think also it's really measured in your team. We had our big staff gathering last night at my house. It was like, our big end of the year extravaganza. There's when I see young women who haven't been with the organization very long talk about the values of Vital Voices and the way that, you see different people share the values and the culture and hold them tight and hold each other accountable, to me, that's huge success. I guess feeling also like I'm somehow balancing it all with my kids as well. It was very funny, working mother fail moment. My daughter's in pre-K, and somebody has to bring snacks every week. And this week, I thought, well, that'll be good because I'll definitely be home that week, and so I'll remember to bring the snacks.
It's the cruelest thing they do to parents, but mothers in particular.
Yes. Anyway, so, Monday rolls around, and Monday night I come home, and my nanny says, Alyse, you forgot to bring the snacks. And I was like, and my daughter looked at me, and she said, no, Mom, it's okay, because there was extras left over from last week, so it's fine, Mom. We'll just get him tonight and bring him. And I thought, this is amazing.
That is success.
I know. It's like my daughter knows it's not the end of the world, even though I think it is, but she knows, so I thought, okay, this is a good moment.
So we ask every person who comes on the podcast for their best piece of advice or life hack, or it can be your life mantra. What is yours?
Well, my life mantra I learned in Beijing, which is use your power to empower. Vital Voices just launched a great partnership with Target where we actually have that on a shirt, which is super cool. So now that mantra is being spread. So that's something I believe. And I think you got to really think about that. All of us have power. How do you use that power that you have to empower other people? Even if it's just, the person, at Starbucks when you get your coffee, like how do you give that power away, because it will come back to you in a big boomerang way. Truly. It's a lot about spreading kindness, but, kindness is a very, very powerful thing, right? So I'd say that's my piece of advice. I'd say in terms of a life hack, I think really being open to learning, and we talked about this, about feedback. I know leadership is a practice. It's not a final destination. You don't get there and you're all of a sudden there and you're perfect. You're never going to be that, right? So just, keep trying and know it's a practice. You want to constantly get better and take that feedback so that you can.
Yeah. Alyse, Thank you.
Thank you.
So wonderful to have you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. To learn more about Alyse, you can visit our website at www.shesaidshesaidpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free to leave us a review. We would love to hear from you. As always, thanks for listening.